Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 241st episode of the Atlas Society Asks. I'm Jag, I'm CEO of the Atlas Society. I'm very excited to have Gregg Hill, co-founder and general partner at Parkway Venture Capital, join us to talk about his amazing journey and the future of investment in AI and emerging technologies. Gregg, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm very excited that this is actually one of his very first podcast interviews. So we're going to try to give him a warm welcome and come up with some great questions. So I did a little bit of research, and growing up early on, you embarked on the path of becoming a professional in tennis. How did that come about?
So it was my dad was a really great athlete, and my mom was a cheerleader. So I kind of grew up around sports, and my parents, kind of going back, I think they were 17 when they met, and they had me at 18. So they were just teenagers, and my dad, he didn't really he came from a tough household, and he really didn't get the opportunity, even though he still holds all the records like 50 years later at his high school, public and private. And he came from kind of an area where there wasn't much opportunity, including where I came from. And my dad and mom saw that I was playing with balls when I was a kid, always playing with balls, and I had really good hands. And they put me in baseball and basketball. But tennis courts, there was no tennis in our area at all. Like you never drive by like a tennis court or a country club or anything. So kind of out of sight, out of mind. I love sports. I love competing, and I love traveling with my dad because he was playing still semi-professional over the weekends in basketball, and he had travel teams. And I would sit there and watch all the games all day, and then we would talk, and he was so competitive, and he would explain, next time that won't happen. What do you think? And it was just very intense, household for winning and losing. And
Yeah.
that was just kind of how that was kind of what I was used to. Right. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, you were about 9 or 10 years old. You were sent to train full time, and you never went home again. Looking back, was there a sense that you missed out on some of the more usual aspects of childhood? I know right before we went live, I was asking, how would you feel if, your 9-year-old or 14-year-old just decided to embark on this kind of career and start out as a child athlete? And you really kind of had to pause on that because you said it's not for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not for everyone. And it's kind of all I knew because it happened so early. I actually look back, and I can tell you the movie I saw right before I left, and it's the last memory I have with my family growing up. I remember it vividly. So it's kind of like that was the last time I had a normal family life, and then it was just in the dorms, training every single day, and traveling around the world, and trying to create my craft, get better at it. I was, I would call home once a week. When I left, when Nick Bollettieri wanted me to go down there, and he told my parents, best hands I've ever seen, I'm gonna make him a champion. And my parents were like, we've never played tennis. This is crazy. And my dad said, if you're gonna go down there, yeah, all I ask is two things from you. And he sat me down in the living room, and he said, outwork everyone, want it more than everybody who goes there, and never call home upset. Because
Wow.
if you call home upset one time, there's no way your young mother, her firstborn, she's going to come and get you. So when I would make phone calls in that week, I would just make sure that I had the right mindset, and I kept it light, and everything was great. And then I just took the burden on if I was down, and I leaned on my friends at the academy, and, coaches and things like that. But I never put that burden on my family.
And then there was that fateful event that effectively ended your tennis career. What happened?
Yeah, it was kind of a blink of a moment kind of blink of an eye moment, I guess you call it, where your life changes forever. I was just finishing a tennis match at a tennis tournament. My coach had to go to his grandfather passed away, so he wasn't there with me. He said, "Can I come back in 2 days?" And I said, "Of course." So I was by myself, impatient, because I finished the match, I won, and I'm ready to get back to the hotel. So instead of waiting for the tournament car, I get a taxi cab because it's right around the corner. I mean, I could probably have walked it in 15 minutes, it wasn't that far. Um, get in there, and yeah, and an intoxicated driver hit us really hard, and a few minutes later, and it's just you know my whole body was a wreck, and I was in the hospital, and it took me years and years and years to recover, just to be a normal walking, out of pain human being. After that, and tennis was just pro tennis ended uh,
Wow.
that moment. Yeah.
So, recently here in Malibu and elsewhere, we've been dealing with the recent fires. I lost my home here in 2007. And when you go through something like that, a traumatic loss, I like to say every bad situation can be made worse. You can either try to stabilize and rebuild your life, or you can let grief take you down and you start to lose other things. So when you had this horrific accident and you lost this dream of a tennis career, what resources did you draw on to overcome and to move forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't really talk to anybody about it. I actually felt so down that I didn't want to reach out. It's almost too painful, right? So you don't want to really talk to anybody about it. You want to be by yourself. Um, and the first thing was get out of pain, right? I got to figure out a way that I'm not in pain because I didn't want to take painkillers and all that stuff. They were putting me all this stuff, and I've never taken that stuff in my life. It's really uncomfortable, and my goal was to get out of pain. And in my mind, I still thought I could come back. Of course, right? The typical athlete, no matter what the doctors say, I'll be back, because I didn't know anything else, right? I mean, I was a tennis, professional. And I wasn't just a tennis professional. I was like, you know, worldwide known, and the heir apparent to Agassi, and I'm in every Nick Bollettieri book, and I've been on 60 Minutes, and with Kornikova, and I mean, I was the future of tennis. I wasn't just a tennis player. I was one of the best talents in the world. So, and I earned it, and I knew this was my destiny. And now I have to think, oh, was I wrong? Like, what was that all for? All that sacrifice. So, dark nights, dark moments, PTSD, starts kicking in, and but I remember when I was a kid, when I went through really hard times, when I was really stressed out, the best thing for me was always to get active. Just use your mind, focus, have a schedule. So I started trying to create a schedule every single day. I wake up in the morning, I do the same thing, and little goals, right? Little goals every single day. And that with the rituals and the activity, even though I couldn't do much, right? Because I was in pain, but my goal was get healthy, and I had a 5-year plan. In 5 years, I'm going to come back and make the greatest comeback ever in tennis, which didn't happen, obviously, and would happen. But you have to have something to look forward to. And I was so down, I needed to have some inspiration because my parents, my family, they didn't know how to talk to me. They wanted to console me at some level, but what do you say, right? What do you say to um, you know they know how much I sacrificed, and it was almost like words were more painful than no words. So I went with the I was it was a lonely journey for a while.
So, what did you do after that? How did you shift gears with your career, and when and how did the pivot come to investing?
Oh gosh, it was a long journey to get to investing. I didn't even know what investing meant. Um, I'd have to look it up probably at that point. Um, yeah, so once I got out of pain, and I started feeling a little better about maybe 2 years later. It was 2 years where those were the toughest years. I decided to move back to Los Angeles. Um, and that's where I met my business partner from Parkway, Jesse Coors Blankenship. He was living there. And, that's when, like, he's a technologist. He was a young professor at Columbia, and kind of we can get to that later. But he was looking at the world very differently, seeing everything where technology was going, and we talked about it all the time. And I was always talking about what it takes to get there, and the strategy and the dedication and all that. And we kind of picked each other's brain every single day, and we hung out all the time. It was almost like he helped me heal, and he was also came from a situation with his family. I think we met at the right time where we needed each other in some ways. Like, it was like really meant to be. Um, so that's when I got the bug for technology, and I started diving in, and then over time, um, I joined YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, and I got introduced to venture capital, and I started making investments in Silicon Valley, and I started, I didn't come from a financial background or Goldman Sachs, but I started seeing the industry maybe differently than others. I didn't like a lot of things about it, just to be honest. Wasn't a big fan, um, but I thought there was a better way to do it, investing and supporting the founders. Um, and I felt like a lot of the people that were supporting these companies, they really didn't have a story. They were academics, and they hadn't really lived a life of like I had, and they were missing their instincts were just there weren't instincts. And I was seeing all this stuff, and eventually I started just joining the boards and being the major investor in these companies, because I always seemed to sense and help the companies so that they never went under, and they always had a success. And
Right.
that's what I'm
Well,
proud of. Yeah.
any great entrepreneurial success or journey always begins with identifying here's a gap,
Mhm.
some needs that are going unmet, and it sounds like you did that with regards to the way you interact and support the entrepreneurs that are the startups
Yeah.
that you guys are investing in. So you said something that triggered me in a good way when you said that at that time you had to look up what finance is and what investment is. And I worked for many years for the financier Ted Forstman of Forstman Little and Company. It was a private equity firm specializing in leverage buyouts. So I think to some in our audience, private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, that it just might seem like, well, they're all doing kind of the same thing, but they're really not. So help us to understand where venture capital fits in the world of finance. Like, what's the
Yeah.
difference between a VC company, a hedge fund, or a private equity firm?
Yeah, they're all so different. We don't even really play together at all. Every once in a while, we bounce off each other, but I think they say private equity. It's private equity and venture capital, and it's they put it together. Venture capital is more earlier stage. So Series A, like or seed investments, when a company's founded, they need venture capitalists to support them. So you don't necessarily always have a balance sheet or, a lot of revenue. It's a new innovation, like a new technology a lot of times, or an existing technology is getting better. And you're betting on team. You're checking boxes that private equity can easily check and replace because they're more later stage. And it's a business that's more it's been around longer, and it's got a lot of more historical success year after year. And it'd be an example of like Google early on. There was nothing to invest in for a private equity firm. It's an idea, it's a team, and becomes one of the biggest companies in the world. But venture private equity would never invest that early. They're going to wait 6, 7, 8 years before, so they can have more predictability. So the returns in private equity are much lower. Um, and in venture capital, they would say is riskier because you don't have that balance sheet. But that's in venture capital, the biggest returns and the most billionaires have been created out of the venture capital world in history.
So it does seem that among these various approaches, venture capital carries significantly more risk than, let's say, private equity, higher uh, upside, higher downside.
That's right.
But does that, I don't know, complicate the way that you approach potential investors in your fund?
Um, I mean, I think we have a track record now, and even before in venture capital, I didn't get to it, but I started with I co well, I backed, and I was the largest investor in one of the best earliest AI companies with my friend Jesse. So we had a 5-year run together and brought a really amazing technology to market, and we created a new market called generative design. It was essentially automating industrial parts, like mechanically engineered parts, like for cars and heavy machinery, airplanes, things like that. And that's his research. In Colombia, we spun it out and we created a company. So I, in 5 years, we had a great exit, and now about 25% of the world's products are designed with that software today. Even our even our portfolio companies, they're using that software to design humanoid robots and autonomous vehicles. It's amazing. So I got my, even though I'm an investor, I got my start as like a tech, in the tech world, as a co-founder and a board member. So I took that the lessons learned as just an investor first, and then when I got a chance to actually back a startup and get really involved, um, it was such a strategic company that if you would have just been asleep at the wheel for even a couple of days, that company never would have been successful. So it was a lot of instinct, a lot of smart decisions, and it created the industry and all the comps now, the highest comps in that entire, I think it's like a 10 or $20 billion industry now, all came out of the company that we sold. So I learned a lot there as well. And I, with Parkway, what's unique about us is, because we had that success, so people are a little bit more willing to back you because you're an expert in the AI world, is how they see, because you were there early and you're not just following the trend. I think anyone getting into AI now has like no chance of getting in the big deals because you need to be early or you're late.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like a startup, right? You're early or you're late.
and speaking of early, Parkway was an early investor in Figure AI with other investors, including NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Jeff Bezos, among other huge names. News came out last week that Figure is raising 1.5 billion at a 39.5 billion valuation. Can you talk a little bit about Figure AI and its possible uh, at home use and also in the workplace?
Yeah. Yeah, we actually we led their Series A, which was a big deal because in two
And this
years,
is just so people know, we're talking about humanoid robots,
yeah,
right?
humanoid robots. The robots are going into your house and revolutionizing manufacturing. They're already working at BMW right now, 24 hours a day, fleets of them, and it's like a 10x output on a single a humanoid. It's incredible. It's we're going to see a productivity level that the world's never seen before. Factories are going to be redesigned. Manufacturing can come back to the U.S. It's really exciting times, and Figure's the first group in history to commercialize the humanoid. Um, we have a second customer that we can't speak about that we have like 85,000 humanoids, and between the two of them, it's many, many, many billions in annual recurring revenue in just a few years. It is the largest market ever, and it's 10 to 15 times larger than the automobile space. Um, it's The market is tremendous, and it's 80% of all the venture capital money this year is going into the space. It's really
Hmm.
the only show in town. Nothing else is interesting anymore besides this right now in BC.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we led their Series A, and we're on the board. I'm on the board. Jesse's on the board, and I think it comes back to deep personal relationships. We knew Brett um, 10 years ago when we had our startup where I was speaking of in New York, and we were in the same cohort, like the same incubator. It was like Columbia guys, NYU, and there was like 200, 250 startups, and only two winners in there. The big winners were Brett's company and ours. And you just hang out together, and Jesse and Brett got to see each other a lot more, so they became really good friends. And um, you fast forward, and it's like, he's got this amazing company, his third company, and he really wanted to work with people he trusted, and Parkway had just done a big deal before that. So he was really in Silicon Valley. So he was really excited to work with us. And then we were actually the news that came out, if you read the article, we're leading that $39.5 billion round, Parkway. We're the lead investor, even in that.
Yeah. Amazing. So I can't help but notice that Tesla is also making a humanoid robot that, similarly to you, Elon Musk predicts could be the biggest selling product of all time. What are some of the similarities and differences between Tesla's Optimus and Figure AI's Figure O1?
Yeah. Optimus is great. It's the two big players are Optimus and Figure. Um, and Yeah, Optimus is part of Tesla. So the only way to invest in Optimus is just to buy Tesla stock. But Elon feels that some like 90%, he's thrown out a bunch of numbers of Tesla's future value is going to be Optimus. He foresees 10 trillion in annual recurring revenue from Optimus, which would be, you know, 20 times the size, 15 times the size of Nvidia, is how big he thinks this market is. Um, so those are the two big players. Optimus is similar to Figure. It's a general useful robot that can do anything. You can ask it to do anything. There was a video that came out today in Figure, two humanoids. They put an apple, they put a banana, they put ketchup, they put all this stuff on the table, and they just asked both of them. They said, "Figure out what to do with this." And they looked at each other, and they were working together, and they were putting it in their fridge, and they're moving together. And it's more of a human and robot form than a robot.
Hmm.
It's not like you're thinking where they're clamping and pulling stuff like this. It's soft touch, um, and it's got the same gait as a human. It's it's incredible, and the world you're going to see, and Elon's saying this too, is in the next, call it 10, 15 years, maybe 15 years from now, there may be more humanoids on the planet than humans. Humanoids. It's not just going to be isolated. They're going to be on the road. They're going to be your security guards. They're going to be everywhere, and humans and robots are going to coexist, and there's no stopping it. We're already bringing 150,000 of these right now out. You will see the first humanoids in the home in the next couple of years. There's going to be orders by the millions, and you're going to walk into eventually every single person's house around the world, and it's like an iPhone. You're going to see a humanoid that is doing chores, watch, making you coffee, teaching your kids school at home. You can ask it anything. Rearranging your books. Um, you know, just making sure porch pirates don't steal your packages. You name it, right? It's like
Putting
it's
out fires, that would be good. Add
yeah.
that
I
to
mean,
the top list.
how great would it have been to have 1,000 of them around, helping out. So this is what's happening. It's blowing people's minds. Um, Jesse and I did a in Paris for JP Morgan. We did this event. It's the most powerful people out, the top 100 JP Morgan clients, and we presented this. And we're the biggest names you can think of there. Um, and they were, they said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I am just, they couldn't even speak, because, a lot of people think this is science fiction, but it is happening like it's happening right now. And you're going to wake up one day and it's going to be at your doorstep.
Well, I can't wait for that day to come. So, do you see a future scenario in which Tesla and Figure AI become kind of the Ford and GM competing? Are we going to have other entrants into the market?
Yeah,
What do you
it's a
anticipate?
great question. They're definitely going to be competitors. There's room for both. It's not a winner take all business. There'll probably be one or two others that come, but there's not going to be 10 others. It's really hard to pull off. Like there's only 5 people in the world that understands the thermal system needed for a humanoid. 5, because it's brand new, and it's just amazing because the humanoids, I think it's like 500 degrees it runs at inside. So if you don't have this state of the art thermal system, everything shuts down on you. So it's so much easier to build like an autonomous car than this. This is the great, as Jensen, the founder of NVIDIA, said recently publicly. I don't know if you just saw the news. He called the humanoid space and he pointed to Figure because he was on stage with him. He said, "This is the greatest product of our lifetime, and it's the biggest market in history." And he said, "I've never seen anything like this." Even Jensen, who's running NVIDIA, knows that this is something that you know, it's going to make like that look like Apple size look small. It's just remarkable. That's why it's worth 39 billion, 40 billion in 2 years. And
Right.
so 2 years from now, it'll probably be worth 3 or 400 billion, and then it'll probably be potentially the fastest company ever to 1 trillion. Like, and we think, it's just 2 orders right now, and there's like a couple 100 billion pipeline. You can't manufacture them fast enough. So you just got to raise money, keep expanding, and then eventually you start getting manufacturing going where you can deliver millions of them, and then eventually between Optimus and Figure and a few others, there will be billions of these in the market.
All right, we've got some really interesting questions coming in from our audience, so I'm going to dig into a few of those. My Modern Galt, good to see you here, my friend. He's asking, what do you think is the hallmark of a good relationship between you and the owners of the startup founders of the companies that you're investing in?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in storytelling and getting to know people, like we're doing today. You tell your story. I don't think you can get to know anyone unless you hear their story and spend time with them, um, because then you can understand, their strengths, weaknesses, pain points, and mine as well. So I like to get to know the founders. I want them to know where I came from, what I'm trying to accomplish, my goals. I want them rooting for me as much as I'm rooting for them. I don't want to be an arm's distance relationship. An arm's distance relationship, they're never going to text you when there's an issue. And you may not be able to help, but it's nice when they text you first because you can at least be a part of the conversation and help, and actually go find someone that can. Um, I think the trust level, it gets really deep with these founders, but if you're just a finance person who's invests the money and says, "I'll see you in 4 months at the board meeting," um, you're never going to get close to the founder. All he sees you as a check, just somebody I come to when I need money. And I'm sorry, but even though it's venture capital, these are companies like a family. They need to be nurtured. Um, and you can't just leave your family for 3 months and come back and expect everything's fine, right? You got to be there and you got to nurture it. So I can't do it every single day, but sometimes every single day for a couple weeks, I have to with certain portfolio company founders because they need me. and they need my partner and the team. And then maybe they don't need me for another month, but at least I know that if something comes up, they're not nervous to call me, even if it's the worst news ever. Let's try to figure it out. And I think having a story, and they understand you. But if they just knew me as Greg, the venture capitalist, and Parkway, and that's all they knew, you would never you would never build a relationship. They actually have to know who I am outside of just writing them a check.
Right. Okay. Jackson Sinclair asks, how do you respond to lobbyists and others who are out there and they are very opposed to these kinds of emerging technologies? For example, AI is very energy intensive, and many environmentalists are against it.
Yeah, it's a complicated one. I think it seems like this administration's really backing it. Um, I'm not saying the last administration didn't, but it seems like it's really pro AI. Yes, there's an energy demand. We had to figure that out because you put too much. There's too much. The grid can't handle the demand, right? For the compute power needed. Um, so now they're looking at more nuclear, and environmentalists don't like that. But think about Bill Gates, right? He's an environmentalist, and he's been pushing nuclear for a decade. He said it's so there's all these contradictions out there. When you talk to folks, at the end of the day, you got to solve the problem and protect people, but you can't just say no nuclear, no this, and we're going to have windmills, pushing AI forward. It just doesn't work, right? So you have to find a way to move forward, and the energy demands are there. There's also fusion, and that's almost there, and you can drop in small fusion reactors that are that have a better reputation than even nuclear, and they can run many of these data centers, like some of the biggest data centers in the world. But Elon Musk, he just built the largest data center in the world in Memphis, Tennessee, $10 billion, and I think he had to prepay, like, I may be wrong on this, so don't quote me for 100% on this, but I think it was like 500 or 600 million he had to prepay because it would have cost consumers so much money because of the grid was over, it was running at like overload. So essentially, he prepaid for 2 or 3 years so they wouldn't pass those costs on to the consumers. So that's
Wow.
what you're up against. You need data centers to drive humanoids, to drive the chips, and NVIDIA, which everybody needs chips now. So there's you could build a data center every single day right now, for the next 10 years, and you're still way behind. It's not enough. So it's definitely an issue, but I think nuclear, I think it just got a bad stigma back in the day, right? With everything that happened, the leaks and everything. But we're a lot smarter and a lot better at those things now. Um, so nuclear plants today are not what they were many years ago. So
Right.
there's a safe way to do it. We're not in the 80s anymore. The 80s was dangerous everywhere you looked. I mean, look at the gyms we played in outside. I'm surprised we all survived playtime in school. I mean, everything was dangerous back then.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're looking at nuclear, looking at different kinds of ways to power this increased energy demand in order to fully scale it. Guillaume Verdun, he's the founder of Xtropic AI, and he's also going to be our keynote at our Gulch conference in Austin coming up in June. And he has proposed thermodynamic computing to optimize energy efficiency and processing speed. Are there people out there like him that are working on not just powering the way existing computing is functioning, but also finding ways to make computing itself more efficient?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's in the works, but it's just not ready yet. It's unproven. So in the meantime, it may take 3, 4 years. It could be 2 years, or it could be 7 years. We don't know yet. So in the meantime, the energy demands they're not going anywhere, right? But there's a lot of really smart folks that are trying to figure that out, and everybody needs it. Like a good example would be like OpenAI. OpenAI spends $6 or $7 billion a year on compute to be able to service every time you ask chat something. That's energy intensive. Um, and imagine millions and millions, and they keep growing their business, and they need more and more demand, so they keep spending more. So they're spending, I think they may spend 9 or 10 billion this year. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? For energy to drive AI, and there's got to be a better way. But in the meantime, he's got to have data room support, and he's got to pay for it. And that's an issue for Oracle. That's an issue for Elon. We all have the same issue right now, and we just eventually there'll be a technology that'll take the burden off some, but it's not ready now.
Right. Well, assignment number one for the humanoid genius robots. Help
Yeah,
us
go figure
figure
it
out
out.
this challenge.
Yeah, go figure that out.
Right. So, Figure has partnered with ChatGPT for some AI thoughts on. Wondering if you saw the news. Well, who you'd have to be living under a rug if you didn't, if you in the tech world and you didn't hear the news about DeepSeek that was released, and it's a Chinese competitor. It was at first kind of hailed as this Sputnik moment, and people were freaking out. Uh, wasn't really such a big deal. I mean, they purportedly claimed to be able to create it for a fraction of what some of these other uh, companies have spent to create other search engines. Um, yeah, so take on DeepSeek.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's not entirely accurate that they only spent that much money.
Right. Like,
Because
so how are we going to trust a a DeepSeek search type interface when you can't even ask them, gee, what happened in Tiananmen Square back in the day? I mean, the Chinese Communist government does control what these companies say to a large extent, and whether or not that was accurately what they spent, or if this is indeed a little bit on the side to try and shake things up and project more capability than they actually have.
I think the biggest takeaway I got from DeepSeek is it showed that in that space, the LOM space, what one person can do, another can. So regardless of what they spent, what OpenAI has is just not unique enough to have a moat that can protect you from a founder like DeepSeek that just shows up and is just as good or just as close as good as OpenAI. And I don't like spaces like that. I mean, you can always figure it out. You can go into other spaces but I mean, what they're doing is just scraping the internet for information. I mean, they're regurgitating they're just trying to find data everywhere, like everything that's ever happened. And that's great. But the proprietary data is the uniqueness, right? So I think the company that has the edge in this space by far, in my opinion, is XAI, Elon's company, because he has years and years and years of data that no one else has. SpaceX data, which is like a lot of physics data. Tesla, so he has all this data, and then of course Twitter. He when he bought X or he turned it to X, he essentially owns all that. Every tweet that's ever happened, it's his. He can do whatever he wants to with it. You sign terms of use, and there's some really good data in there that OpenAI would not have.
Hmm.
And so I think it differentiates himself, and that's something DeepSeek won't have. So I think regardless of what DeepSeek did in the market, the winner in this, I think, out of everyone is it's probably going to almost guarantee XAI is going to be the leader.
Yeah, I was playing around with Grok 3 last night, and
Yeah, not
pretty
bad.
impressive.
Yeah, it's impressive. It is, and a captive audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So another one of your investments is in Google spinoff Sandbox AQ in quantum computing. So again, for the layman in the audience, what is quantum tech?
Well, this is actually a quantum simulation company. So it's a spin out from Google. It was incubated in Google for like 5 years, and they spun it out. Jack Hittery is the founder, and Eric Schmidt, the former CEO and chairman of Google Alphabet, is the chairman of Sandbox AQ. And quantum simulation, you're using the power of quantum and AI. That's why they call it AQ, Sandbox AQ. It's AI and quantum, and they're able to basically simulate or imitate a quantum computer today with software. So they built these proprietary algorithms um, at Google, and they still keep developing them. And they did a deal with NVIDIA, and very powerful deal where they're able to change the code on the CUDA, the chips, the latest and greatest NVIDIA chips, and they can run millions of simulations that way. And when you can run millions of simulations, you can, using quantum and AI off their algorithms, you can simulate a quantum computer. You can solve like physics, physics problems like instantly. Um, and an LOM, like a large language model, can't do that. Yeah, again, it's just scraping the internet, and it's great, and it can help your business, but it can't go deep with B2B. It's not going to fundamentally change your business. And what large quantitative models can do, which is what this is. It's a little technical, but this is a very technical company. They're able to go deep, and they can help with the drug discovery phase, where for a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company, where it takes like 10 years to get through that process, they can get through it in like months, if not sooner. Savings, and they can help bring like a Parkinson's drug, to market a lot faster. And that's impossible for XAI or OpenAI to do. And that's why this company is so powerful, because they're solving problems that the world never thought possible. It
Wow.
really is the Oppenheimer team. It's like quantum is so powerful. It's scary. It's the reason why this company started was some bad actors were using early quantum computers, and they were basically, hacking, or they were bypassing RSA standards for encryption so easily, and it became a national security issue, and it still is right now. So that's a real problem, and that's kind of how the company formed, is to start defending against that. And that's called post quantum cryptography, PQC, and that's really the new standard for encryption. If you don't have that, or you don't adopt that at some point, you're not protected enough. I mean, a quantum computer, quantum technology, just even a very inferior one, can bypass any cybersecurity system in the world. So
Wow.
you can imagine, like, you hear about cyber warfare, right? It's like bio warfare, cyber warfare. There's all these warfares, and you know, quantum technology in the wrong hands can really hurt. It can take down airlines. I mean, they're spoofing them every day, where GPS is going out. Airlines are flying blind. Um, there was 30,000 flights affected last year from this. Cancellations, they never tell you why your flight is canceled. It's because, they had GPS issues, because GPS is a really old technology. It needs to go away. Um, I, c- you and I can jam. We and I can jam
Nerd
our
out
whole
on
neighborhood.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Um,
jam our whole neighborhood. It's pretty easy to jam.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking of one particular neighbor that, no, just kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Me too.
so we all have one, right? So Gil Verdun, who I was talking about before, together with Mark Andreessen, who's a neighbor of mine here in Malibu, helped to launch the Techno-Optimist movement. They had that Techno-Optimist manifesto, as well as EAC, or effective acceleration, as a counterweight to more pessimistic perspectives on AI and techno-doomers who see the future AI at best as a driver of mass unemployment, or at worst, potentially future overlords of humanity. Do you have a perspective on all of this?
Yeah, it's more little bit more leaning on the Terminator movies of what could
Mhm.
happen, right? Um, so I'm less pessimistic. I think sometimes we need to look back and think about uh, what what the internet even did to humanity in a harmful way. It really hurt the world. Um, Millions of people died because of the internet with terrorism, sex trade. I could go on and on. 9/11 would never have happened without the internet. I could go on forever about what the internet's done. It took down Main Street in the USA, killed retail, killed businesses. There's industries that went away, and it was just it hurt a lot. But then there's my other side of me, that new businesses were created because of the internet. um, it did a lot for humanity. It helped in a lot of ways. So what I'm saying is, you can look at the internet the same as AI, um, and say there's going to be this side of it, and there's going to be some of this side of it, and it's going to have to play out. Um, but in terms of just like business models, the business models are falling apart. Restaurants are going out of business. They can't hire anybody. They're on like, McDonald's right now are running on like three people at you know at the peak time of the day, because they can't even make money at McDonald's by hiring one more person, because
Well, at least, President Trump, prior to the election, he was willing to pitch in, so that helped.
yeah, yeah, well, it's just expensive. Human capital is a huge expense. And in manufacturing, it's just really hard, because you have to pay a lot of money to do repeatable tasks, and about 10% of the workforce doesn't even show up every day. So that, at Amazon facilities, and this is just jobs, a lot of jobs that people don't want to do anyway. So hopefully with AI, there'll be a boom with better jobs too. That's really important. It's not just the amount of jobs, it's the type of jobs for people that they can get a little more excited about, instead of just 1920 style and having to be in a warehouse all day. And what you do is pick up 2,000 boxes a day, or 200, whatever the number is. That's really hard. um, and yeah, I think about culture. The younger generation, purposehood is important. I get it. They want to have a job that they're proud of and all that. And the older generation, maybe that, you know they're willing to do it, but there's no way even I could go do that job, because my body wouldn't allow me to do it.
Mm.
Eventually, you need breaks, you need vacations, and you're probably not gonna do that job for very long. It's very difficult. And then there's hazardous conditions. There's all these, issues, and you saw in Amazon there was the deaths. People were getting really hurt. Um, so there's a good and a bad side, but in terms of the Terminator, it's just pure nonsense. Um,
Right.
yeah, it's not like they're gonna all of a sudden have a mind of their own and do that. It's totally controlled, so that's not an issue. But I think it's gonna take a moment for everybody to get used to this. But I also think a humanoid, even though it doesn't have a soul, it does reason and try to make you feel like they're listening to you, right? And I think that as humans, we've lost that anyway, in some ways. And it's like, if you could just sit down with them and no one's home, and you just watch the game and you ask us some questions, I think people are going to absolutely not be able to live without it.
So, speaking of Andreessen, he describes this very chilling meeting that he and his colleagues had with the Biden administration AI advisors, in which the advisors shared their vision of having only a few AI players in coordination with the government controlling the future of the industry,
Hmm.
one in which competing AI startups wouldn't be allowed or would be severely restricted. And Andreessen said that he walked out of that meeting and immediately decided that he had to endorse Donald Trump. Do you share Andreessen's or others' concerns that a overly intrusive and centralized government approach when it comes to a flourishing AI environment?
Yeah, I don't like that. That's too Europe. And I think that's why Europe's behind. It's like the bigs connected to the government. No small companies get any power or control, and they really are, a little bit behind the US because of that. Over regulated, too much control, and you always feel like it's like a group of five deciding what's going on in the entire country, right? Just in everything, and that's not good. So what you want is somebody like Brett Adcock or myself or whoever it is to come from where we come from, and to be able to do what we want to do, and be successful, and not have to go, you know, and be best friends with an administration, and try to fight in there with and have a competitor that can beat you because they're deciding who's going to win and who's going to lose. That's not capitalism. That's not good. But that's what, like, that always happens though. Sometimes on both sides, and it's in different ways. I think it was Thomas Jefferson. I was reading this book a long time ago. Is he was all against this stuff, right? And then when he got power as a president, he realized he really liked it, and he became a lot of what he didn't want to be before that. But once he became president, he started making decisions that you could look at it as very much different than his beliefs before he became president. So it's still to be determined what's going to happen in this administration. It's still got to play out regardless of what was said in the campaign trail. I always say that. It's got to play out. Um, uh, but at the end of the day, you don't want like a deal being made in the back room with Elon where he controls everything. That would be looked at the same way as Andreessen said with Biden. That's not good either, right?
Mhm.
So you just don't want too much power and just a few people's hand controlling AI. I think a lot of so the deep seek, I don't see that as a bad thing. I actually think it was actually good. I think it kind of humbled OpenAI and these groups, and it made them realize that there's another deep seek coming, and they don't have as much power now as they did before deep seek came, and that's really what you want. You want a competitive landscape, and that's better for pricing for customers and everything. Like imagine if there was one humanoid company in the entire world, just one, and everybody wants one, but it's 100% more expensive than it should be, you know, and that's Europe. Everything's it's two companies, one in Italy, one tourist company, high-end tourist company. There's not two, there's one. You know, there's no competitive landscape the same way as the U.S.
So a friend of mine, Jim Pinkerton, likes to say, nothing propinques like propinquity, meaning there's an advantage to being in close proximity in many areas of life. You are based in Florida. It seems like most of your partners are based in New York. I understand you go up there once a week or every other week. And yet many of your key investments are in companies based in California. And if you look at some of the top VC firms, the majority of them are also based in California, sometimes specifically in Silicon Valley. Now, I'm saying that at a time when companies are leaving California in droves. But are there advantages to being in proximity to the tech startup scene, or does technology kind of neutralize that? And do you see the center of gravity sort of geographically shifting?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot there. I'll try to tackle this. Um, we, I think at some point everybody has an office in Silicon Valley if they're in tech, and that's something Parkway is working on right now. But the first things first, it's not like you just go out there and plant your flag and get deals in Silicon Valley, the best deals because you're out there. You still have to perform. Um, and, you still have to, fight for these deals. And if you're in San Francisco or New York, those are number 1 and 2 anyway, right? The number 1 and 2 cities in the country for venture capital, fundraising startups is New York and Palo Alto, San Francisco. So, for me, it was like, okay, we want to get the first Silicon Valley deal, but it doesn't have to be in Silicon Valley, and it happened to be Sandbox AQ. That was our first big one, a couple years ago. That was a big deal, and now Figure, right? Definitely the hottest company in Palo Alto. So we're known out there. We just don't have an office, and now it makes more sense, because we're more known out there to plant our flag, because you got to hire people, who's going to be a partner out there. But for us being out there full time and not being in New York, I think it's actually not being in New York can really hurt your scaling of your venture capital firm, because
Yeah.
it's still the financial capital of the world. And there are people in New York that just don't go to San Francisco.
Mhm.
And you don't really have the same, it's techie. And Mark, I know Andreessen, and there's a lot of great people out there. I think Andreessen lives a couple doors down from Brad, actually, at COG. So
He lives out here in Malibu now, or at least one of his homes.
who's that? Andreessen?
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And he used to be up, I think, a couple doors down from Brad in Palo Alto, but Mark did. But anyway, I don't think it's like you can just scale your company because you're in Silicon Valley. I think it's not easy to raise money out there. You can, if you're a small firm starting out. And I just think we were able to raise more money in New York. We have a name in New York because the old company was a New York company. We had a good ecosystem. And now we could branch out and be in Silicon Valley. But I will say there are companies that come out of Silicon Valley, and always will, that really can't be based anywhere else. So super technical companies like Figure, you think about like people there's only a few people in the world that can build this actuator or this thermal system or the unique stuff, right, about it. They're coming from Google X and different companies, Tesla, and they've been working on it, and they're on the forefront, and they really love Northern California. That's where they stay, and they're your key employees when you're building a company like this. And if you're even in Texas, I think you're at a disadvantage in a big way. You're always going to get beat out with talent. There's some just geniuses, and in a company like Figure or Sandbox, like every person you hire, it's like critical talent, and you lose them, and it hurts.
Right.
The growth.
Yeah.
And
I
then
mean,
other companies, not so much. Every company's different.
one of the things that I am enjoying, coming from an Ayn Rand Atlas Shrugged perspective about the current moment, is that you're hearing Trump constantly talk about our geniuses and how important they are and the importance of intellectual capital, in contrast to sort of the envy-driven victimhood narratives in which the successful, the most innovative minds are being sort of held up as objects of, hostility and as threats. So I'm enjoying that, and speaking of geniuses, I've had a wonderful time with you, getting to know you, Gregg, and I just want to thank you for joining us and for the future that you're helping to create.
Thank you. Real pleasure, and we're in good hands. Everybody can sleep soundly.
All right. And I want to thank all of you in the audience. I'm sorry I didn't get to all of your questions. I didn't get to nearly half of mine, but this has been a fascinating conversation. Of course, if you enjoy our programming, please consider making a tax-deductible donation at atlassociety.org/donate. Also want to remind the young geniuses out there, we still have some scholarships left for our upcoming Galt's Gulch in Austin, June 5th through 7th. So do make sure to apply for those. They are going fast, and we'd love to see you there. Next week, I'll be off. We're going to be instead subbing with Atlas Society scholar Stephen Hicks and Richard Salzman. They'll be exploring how capitalist societies tend towards peace, while authoritarian ones tend towards war. That'll be interesting. We'll see you then.